Aldrich Ames did not look like a spy, and he did not behave like one. To anyone observing him at the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, he was the very definition of an ordinary bureaucrat, punctual, meticulous, polite, and deeply embedded in the day-to-day operations of the Counterintelligence Center. Yet beneath this unremarkable exterior lay one of the most consequential traitors in the history of American intelligence. Ames joined the CIA in 1962, fresh from college, idealistic and eager to serve his country. He believed that by working in one of the world's premier intelligence agencies, he would dedicate his life to protecting national security. In the early years, he followed every rule, attended every briefing, and learned the internal procedures and delicate hierarchies that defined espionage work. Over time, however, a sense of frustration and ambition began to grow. He felt underappreciated and overlooked, convinced that his talents and access deserved greater recognition and reward. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, as tensions of the Cold War reached a critical juncture, Ames began taking note of the vast amounts of sensitive information that flowed through his hands daily. Operational plans, the identities of human assets, communications, and intelligence reports. The temptation of influence, power, and wealth began to outweigh his allegiance. In 1985, facing financial pressures and a growing sense of grievance against the agency, Ames made the irrevocable decision to contact the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., offering to provide classified information in exchange for money. At first, the Soviets tested him with small, seemingly trivial information, ensuring his loyalty and discretion. Ames passed each test without hesitation, demonstrating not only his willingness to betray his country, but also his acute understanding of how to maintain secrecy within the CIA. As trust was established, he escalated the volume and sensitivity of the information he delivered. Every report, every dossier, and eventually the identities of American agents operating in the Soviet Union or behind the Iron Curtain were handed over to the KGB. His actions were methodical and calculated. The information Ames supplied allowed the Soviets to systematically dismantle entire networks of American intelligence assets, resulting in the arrest, imprisonment, or execution of dozens of agents who had risked their lives in service to the United States. For years, Ames's betrayal went undetected because he knew precisely how to exploit the trust, routine, and procedural safeguards of the CIA. His unremarkable appearance and adherence to daily protocol masked the extraordinary damage he was inflicting. By the end of the 1980s, the full scale of Ames's espionage was becoming apparent to Soviet intelligence. They considered him one of their most valuable Western assets, a man whose knowledge of CIA operations had cost the United States dearly. Meanwhile, inside the CIA, Ames continued his routine life, attending meetings, supervising operations, and cultivating the impression of a loyal officer. It was this combination of ordinary appearance, procedural expertise, and unassailable trust that allowed him to continue betraying his country for years without raising suspicion. Ames's story is a chilling reminder that in the world of espionage, the greatest threats often hide behind the most ordinary faces. By the late 1980s, Aldrich Ames had fully entrenched himself within the CIA's Counterintelligence Center, holding a position that gave him unparalleled access to some of the most sensitive intelligence on Soviet operations and American assets abroad. With every dossier, memo, and operational file that passed through his hands, Ames recognized the leverage he now possessed over both his own agency and the enemy he had chosen to serve. The KGB, initially cautious, began relying increasingly on the information he provided, realizing that the depth and accuracy of his knowledge could not have been obtained through ordinary espionage methods. Ames' deliveries included the names of American spies operating in the Soviet Union, their locations, personal details, and the schedules of covert operations. With each piece of intelligence he handed over, the Soviets could neutralize networks that had been painstakingly built over years. American agents were arrested, imprisoned, or executed. Operations that had required years of careful planning were compromised in an instant. The CIA remained unaware, initially attributing these setbacks to operational errors, betrayal by foreign informants, or coincidence. Ames' skill lay not only in the information he provided, but also in his deep understanding of CIA internal processes. He could anticipate audits, investigations, and even casual inquiries, allowing him to manipulate the flow of information and cover his tracks with precision. Financially, Ames's espionage had begun to transform his life. He acquired luxury cars, multiple properties, and significant savings, far exceeding the means of a typical CIA officer. The payments from the Soviets were both incentive and affirmation. Each dollar confirmed the value of his betrayal. Colleagues noticed changes, an increase in his spending, occasional unexplained absences, but these observations were dismissed or rationalized. No one could reconcile the outwardly ordinary man they saw every day with the extraordinary level of treachery he had committed. By this time, Ames had developed a rhythm in his operations, meticulous, calculated, and extremely dangerous. The Soviets communicated requests with increasing complexity, and Ames responded flawlessly, ensuring that every breach he facilitated would go undetected internally, while delivering maximum damage to American intelligence efforts. His betrayal reshaped the CIA's understanding of insider threats, revealing that the greatest vulnerabilities were often found not in foreign enemies, but within trusted colleagues who understood the system intimately. Through careful observation, manipulation, and the exploitation of human trust, Ames remained one step ahead of the agency for years. The cumulative effect of his actions was staggering. Entire networks collapsed, lives were lost, and the credibility of the CIA in critical Cold War theaters was compromised. For the KGB, Aldrich Ames was a living, breathing intelligence weapon. For the United States, he represented a catastrophic failure, a reminder that the most dangerous threats often wear a mask of normality, appearing as ordinary, unremarkable individuals until the moment the damage is irreversible. By the early 1990s, Aldrich Ames' espionage operation had reached a level of devastation that few in the CIA could fully comprehend. The consequences of his betrayal became painfully evident as American agents in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union were systematically arrested, imprisoned, or executed. Entire intelligence networks, built over years with painstaking care and extreme personal risk, collapsed almost overnight. Field officers who had spent decades cultivating human sources watched helplessly as those very sources disappeared or were compromised, often under brutal conditions. Meanwhile, Ames maintained his outward appearance of a diligent officer, attending meetings, reviewing reports, and overseeing counterintelligence operations with the same calm precision that had allowed him to operate undetected for years. The Soviets, now confident in the reliability and depth of the intelligence he provided, increased the complexity and sensitivity of their requests. Ames delivered consistently, supplying not only names and locations of American spies, but also critical operational strategies, communication methods, and contingency plans. This insider information gave the KGB unprecedented power to neutralize American operations, manipulate the movements of agents, and anticipate CIA strategies. Within Langley, subtle signs of internal compromise began to appear. Patterns emerged that analysts could not ignore: simultaneous arrests of multiple agents, failures in critical operations, and intelligence leaks that could only have originated from within the agency. Yet, Ames' intimate knowledge of CIA procedures enabled him to deflect suspicion. He manipulated files, provided plausible explanations, and exploited the inherent trust and hierarchy of the agency. Colleagues noticed anomalies, late nights, unexplained travels, and access to sensitive information beyond his immediate responsibilities, but they were unable to reconcile these observations with the man they thought they knew. Ames's ability to hide in plain sight was a testament to his understanding of human psychology and organizational behavior. He knew that the most dangerous threats are often those who appear ordinary, whose routine and familiarity mask extraordinary betrayal. Financial incentives continued to motivate him, but the psychological power of manipulating one's own country's intelligence community added an additional layer of satisfaction. By the time the CIA initiated focused internal investigations, the damage was already catastrophic. Networks were irreversibly compromised, lives had been lost, and America's ability to gather intelligence in critical regions had been severely diminished. The Ames case became a somber study in how insider threats exploit trust, routine, and institutional blind spots, demonstrating that no amount of external vigilance can fully protect an agency from betrayal originating within its own walls.
As the 1990s progressed, the CIA began to piece together the extent of the breaches that had occurred under Aldrich Ames's watch. Investigators noticed patterns that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Agents in multiple Eastern European countries were being compromised at an alarming rate. Operations that had been carefully executed over years were unraveling in ways that suggested intimate knowledge from the inside. While the CIA initially considered foreign counterintelligence as the source of these failures, the mounting evidence pointed toward a shocking internal betrayal. Ames continued his routine with the perfect disguise of normalcy, attending office meetings, supervising counterintelligence operations, and reviewing critical documents without a hint of suspicion. His colleagues, still unaware of his double life, continued to interact with him as a trusted officer. The KGB, meanwhile, increasingly relied on his precise and reliable intelligence. Ames provided them with details that only someone with comprehensive insider knowledge could possess: the identities, roles, and habits of CIA officers, the operational plans for recruiting and handling human sources, and the timing of covert missions. These insights allowed the Soviets to neutralize American agents with devastating efficiency. Analysts began scrutinizing files, cross-referencing personnel movements, and examining financial records. Even subtle anomalies, unexpected bank deposits, changes in lifestyle, and unexplained travel were taken into account. Ames's meticulous planning had included safeguarding against internal detection. He understood the CIA's auditing processes, knew the typical behaviors that might raise suspicion, and engineered his actions to blend seamlessly into the organizational flow. The psychological impact on the agency began to manifest. Officers who had trusted him implicitly grappled with the possibility that the leaks came from one of their own. Emotional responses mingled with professional concern as the CIA realized that its vulnerabilities were not solely operational but deeply human. Ames's espionage demonstrated a painful truth: the most catastrophic failures are often the result of insider knowledge, patience, and the exploitation of trust. By leveraging these factors, he managed to remain undetected for years, all while systematically undermining American intelligence efforts and exposing countless agents to life-threatening consequences. The revelations about his activities would later force the agency to overhaul internal security measures, reinforce counterintelligence protocols, and adopt a culture of heightened skepticism toward personnel who held access to critical secrets. Yet even with these changes, the legacy of his betrayal served as a stark reminder of the fragility of trust within intelligence organizations, and of how one individual's duplicity can ripple outward to compromise entire national security frameworks.
By the mid-1990s, the CIA and FBI had narrowed their investigation to Aldrich Ames as the primary suspect responsible for the catastrophic intelligence breaches that had plagued American operations for nearly a decade. Analysts painstakingly mapped out the compromised networks, tracing each leak to its source, and observed a troubling correlation. Every major exposure of Soviet assets and American agents corresponded directly with Ames's access to sensitive information. Financial scrutiny became a critical component of the investigation. Ames's lifestyle had undergone a dramatic transformation. He now lived well beyond what a mid-level CIA officer could afford, acquiring luxury homes, expensive vehicles, and extravagant personal items. The investigative teams traced these financial gains to payments from Soviet intelligence, confirming the link between his sudden wealth and the clandestine transmissions of classified information. Simultaneously, interviews with field agents who had survived, along with reports from Eastern European collaborators, revealed the devastating consequences of his actions. Several American assets had been arrested or executed, entire espionage networks dismantled, and critical intelligence operations rendered ineffective. The human toll was staggering. Colleagues within the CIA struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew, polite, routine, and ordinary, with the scale of betrayal that Ames had orchestrated. This cognitive dissonance complicated the investigation, as many officers could not fathom that one of their own could be responsible for such systematic destruction. As evidence accumulated, the investigation revealed Ames's extraordinary skill in exploiting the CIA's internal procedures. He anticipated how information could be traced, how anomalies could be detected, and carefully manipulated files to mask his activity. In many ways, his intimate knowledge of the agency's bureaucracy allowed him to operate undisturbed for years, illustrating the terrifying potential of insider threats. Ultimately, investigators compiled a meticulous dossier documenting years of espionage, precise records of compromised agents, operational failures, financial transactions, and patterns of behavior that left no doubt as to his guilt. The Ames case illuminated a painful reality for intelligence communities worldwide. The most devastating espionage is not always executed in dramatic foreign operations, but quietly, systematically, by someone who understands the system from within. The repercussions of his actions were felt far beyond Langley, reshaping American counterintelligence, forcing policy reforms, and leaving a legacy of caution regarding trust, human vulnerability, and the profound impact a single insider can have on national security. The culmination of Aldrich Ames' espionage came in 1994. When the CIA and FBI finally confronted him with irrefutable evidence of his betrayal. After years of meticulous planning, financial forensics, surveillance, and cross-referencing agent compromises, investigators had built a case that left no room for doubt. Ames, who had spent over a decade undermining American intelligence from within, was arrested at his Virginia home, leaving his family and colleagues stunned by the revelations. During interrogation, he confessed to providing the Soviet Union with classified information, detailing how he had systematically compromised agents, operations, and internal protocols of the CIA. The human cost of his actions became undeniable. Dozens of American assets had been captured, imprisoned, or executed, and entire intelligence networks had been dismantled. The trial of Aldrich Ames in 1994 was swift, highly publicized, and served as a warning to the intelligence community about the consequences of insider betrayal. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting both the severity of his crimes and the irreparable damage he caused. In the aftermath, the CIA underwent extensive internal reforms, reinforcing counterintelligence measures and adopting stricter oversight of personnel with access to critical intelligence. Ames's betrayal underscored an uncomfortable truth. The most significant vulnerabilities in any intelligence organization are often internal, rooted in human trust, routine, and the exploitation of procedural knowledge. Scholars and intelligence analysts continue to study the Ames case as one of the most illustrative examples of insider espionage, demonstrating how a single individual, through patience, skill, and access, can inflict devastating harm on national security. The consequences of his actions reshaped Cold War intelligence operations and left a lasting impact on the CIA, prompting a reassessment of internal security protocols and the monitoring of personnel with access to sensitive information. Aldrich Ames remains a chilling symbol of the dangers posed by trusted insiders, a cautionary tale that highlights the delicate balance between trust and vigilance in the shadowed world of espionage.